Peter, I'll start with you then on this. From your perspective, how have you seen companies overcome these security issues? Because they're very real and they're probably the number one concern, I think, for organizations as they begin to think about work at home.
Amit, I think that you're bang on with that comment. As far as I've been covering this market, and I've been watching work at home and analyzing work at home since the midpoint of the 2000s, security has been the omnipresent elephant in the room, to use a pun, in regards to what has probably been the biggest inhibitor or the biggest obstacle for executives to consider using this business model. In regards to how organizations have successfully overcome the security concern, I think it really comes down to a couple of things. People, it comes down to processes, and it comes down to the technology. Now, from the people standpoint, one of the things that I've witnessed and I've seen done very, very well has been the screening of agents, the extent to which work-at-home agents are vetted in terms of their onboarding process, not just in terms of their skills, competencies, experience, but also using elements such as police checks or credit checks, depending on the organization in question and depending on the function in question. That's a great way to figure out how you can best bring on the right type of person who's going to be able to tick the right boxes from a skills perspective and is going to be a minimal risk when it comes to fraud. Equally, having the right processes in place to make sure that if there is a concern about a security breach, that a lockdown on a particular agent's access or their capacity to access information is taken care of and blocked as quickly as possible. And then there comes down to the technology end, making sure that desktops are secure, making sure that the technology is in place on each one of the workstations to limit the extent to which they can access sensitive information while still delivering great interactions. As I say, it all depends on the organization in question. It depends what they deploy, but I've seen really, really good ways of managing work at home in this regard. And when it comes down to the people, the process, and the technology are in place, the work at home solution is going to work very well.
And Peter, just to make sure we're all clear about this, you're talking about this on a global basis, right? So where in Europe you have GDPR issues or you have different privacy issues in different regions, jurisdictions, yeah. You've seen where companies have been able to overcome this across the world.
Very much so, and I'm glad that you raised that point because work at home is really a global business model at this point. I've seen more take up of virtual working or home-based working in locations such as the European Union or countries that aren't necessarily part of the European Union. I've seen it taken up in Australia, New Zealand. We're seeing more in what would be traditional offshore delivery markets where the work would be done in contact center facilities, but now we're starting to see the green shoots in many of these spots where work at home is being done from the standpoint of not necessarily in the contact center, but from individuals' residences now. So exactly to your comment, work at home organizations or organizations deploying work at home are being able to work within the parameters of different compliance regulations that might be related to information security or data protection within these different countries.
Great,
Peter, would you say that if you...
Sorry, go ahead, Terry.
I just want to jump in there a minute. So, Peter, would you say that once we start to identify what is it that we're trying to solve for from a security perspective, there's clearly the technology and the processes available to be able to solve for that, as opposed to just talking about a very broad general subject called security?
Very much so, very much so. As we were saying, it depends on the industry in question, it depends on the vertical market, it depends on the location. But I do believe that the processes and the technology are certainly in place, and they've proven themselves in so many different facets that they can be adapted to different jurisdictions, they can be adapted to different realities in order to make sure that we're not just talking about some nebulous concept of security, but we're talking about solutions that work for an organization in a particular spot, in a particular industry, to make sure it's as robust as possible without compromising the ability to deliver great interactions.
So Scott, how did you respond to your leadership when you were faced with this question when you started this several years ago?
Yeah, I think Terry hit it right on. I think it's easy to hide behind this broad brush called security, and you really need to get into what is it you're trying to solve for. Is it a CPI concern? Is it a policy or a compliance regulation concern? And then drilling into, okay, how do you overcome that? Even at the office, we all deal with those security risks, those CP&I risks, and we have ways to overcome it. You can do the same thing in a work-from-home environment. You just have to take each problem one at a time and determine what the best outcome is that's possible for you.
Great, thank you. Once again, thanks for everybody's questions. We have tons of them coming in, so I'm trying to work through them and paraphrase them and collect some of these questions together. Scott, was your security risk compliance teams, were they involved in the process as you went through this?
Absolutely. Our security, our legal, our compliance, our IT groups were heavily engaged, and you really have to bring everybody together, not just the operations, to do this effectively.